We could finally get to see what Taysom Hill looks like in Kellen Moore's offense soon. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as the Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, it's time for the Saints to build around their run game. We'll discuss how they can do it. The offensive line is going to have to figure out how to manage with yet another loss. And to kick everything off, the biggest story of the day, Taysom Hill and Moreau expected to practice this week. What you should expect, what you shouldn't expect, and why these two players, especially Taysom Hill, if he gets back out on the football field, can make a major difference for Kellen Moore and this Saints offense. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us, whether it's your first time or your next time. We thank you for being here with us this time, making a short first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your first bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head coach Kellen Moore said during his day after press conference with New Orleans media that Taysom Hill and Moreau, both of the two tight ends who have been out since late last year with lower leg injuries that each required surgery, will be coming back to practice this week. So what should you expect? Well, you should expect to hear that Taysom Hill and Moreau both present as early as Wednesday, tomorrow, at New Orleans Saints practice, and ideally they practice all throughout Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Now, this does not add them back to the active roster. They get a 3-week practice window that will allow them to work their way back to the active roster so that they can be available for the team once they are fully healthy. Think about this as an opportunity to get conditioned, learn, continue, execute a little bit of the offense on the field, work with their teammates over the course of the next couple of weeks. So what should you not expect? You should not expect either of these guys to be available up against the New York Giants on a Sunday. If one of them is, it'll be massively surprising and super helpful all at the same time. But more than likely, with this 3-week practice window, both of these players can take their time getting back into this lineup and becoming available for the Saints offense. What happens if either player can't get back to the active roster through those 3 weeks of the practice window? They revert to injured reserve and their season is over. So this does not all begin and end here in week 5. The practice window opens in week 5. They'll be able to practice weeks 5, 6, and 7, and then a decision will need to be made at that point. But of course, a decision can be made at an earlier point as well. I just wouldn't expect either player to be ready for week 5 up against the New York Giants. Now, this would be huge for the New Orleans Saints. They'll have to figure out how they want to move around some of the numbers at tight end with Juwan Johnson, Jack Stoll, as well as Moliki Mataval already on the active roster. I could see Mataval finding his way back to the practice squad. I could see the Saints potentially moving Jack Stoll back to the practice squad as well to get Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill, and Moreau all on the active roster. But we'll see how they decide to cross that bridge when they get there, because they could move on from a player at another position to make a 4th tight end role available, knowing that they'll use Taysom Hill if he gets back onto the field a bunch of different ways all throughout. And I did ask Kellen Moore early on this past offseason, and I followed up with him late in training camp about if Taysom Hill is able to be available, whether or not he would use Taysom Hill at quarterback, under center, or behind center. And his answer to me both times was simply yes. So getting to see Kellen Moore utilize Taysom Hill could be massive. Now, Moreau helps you out in a lot of different ways. He's an all-around tight end who can pass block, run block, and catch passes for you. Gives you another big body target. It's clear what his impact is. There's no doubt about that. I think we can say that it's clear what Taysom Hill's impact is as well. But let me give you some numbers from last season to kind of help quantify this as best as possible. So Taysom Hill appeared in 8 games last season. In 9 games, he was not available for the team. Now, you might hear that and think to yourself, well, wait, he only missed the last 5 games of the season. But remember, he also missed games early on in the season as well, 4 total beginning in week 3. It was like week 3, and it was like 5, 6, and 7 or something like that. So he had missed 4 of those first 7 games in addition to those 5 games at the end of the season. Let's just take a look at some of the situational differences with and without Taysom Hill during the 2024 season. With Taysom Hill, the Saints had a 61.5 red zone touchdown percentage, not a red zone scoring percentage or anything like that, a red zone touchdown percentage. Without him, that number dropped from 61.5 to 52.9, so a near 10% drop without him. On top of that, they simply got to the red zone a lot more. They had 16 red zone touchdowns on 26 red zone drives, but only 17 red zone drives without him on the field. And remember, he was out 1 game more than he was in. So they had more red zone opportunities with him in the game. That is consistent with his entire career. They also had better red zone percentage last year with him in the game. That is actually not consistent with him in his career. If you go all the way back to 2017 and beyond, the Saints with him and without him in the red zone are pretty much the same. They hover around 52 to 55%. But last year, you saw a big gap, a near 9% gap with him versus without him. On top of that, they also saw more better third down conversion percentage by over 8%, nearly 9%. They saw better fourth down conversion percentage by over 13%. They also saw more goal to go situations, twice as many in 1 fewer game, 13 versus 6 without him. And even though their goal to go touchdown percentage was a little bit lower, 11 out of 13 with him versus 6 for 6 without him, I think the point stands. You get more of those goal-to-go situations with him than without him. Those are also things that are consistent with him throughout his career. It's clear how the New Orleans Saints can be helped by having Taysom Hill out on the football field. I have been a big-time doubter about whether or not Taysom Hill was going to be able to go out there on the field. I didn't feel like it was a given. I never said that it wasn't going to be a thing, but I didn't take it as a given. And so him being back out on the practice field, and especially doing it and getting back out on the practice field this early, just 4 weeks into the season, as early as you can come off of the physically unable to perform list along with Foster Moreau, really, really good news for New Orleans on both sides of the football. And to be completely honest, I'm really, really excited to see what it is that Kellen Moore can do with Taysom Hill under center and what that could look like, or even out of the shotgun more appropriately, let's say behind center. I think that he could come up with some really interesting things. There's a lot of the Jalen Hurts game plan that you can run with Taysom Hill from a running quarterback standpoint and a designed run standpoint. So if he can get back out on the field, that should be a lot of fun to watch. And it will continue to make the New Orleans Saints a more fun team as they continue to figure out who they're going to be as they build out their identity. But Taysom Hill, Foster Moreau, both expected to be back at practice this week. Good news for the New Orleans Saints. Not so good news is that the offensive line is going to have to be ready to manage without yet another starter for multiple weeks. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Mizzen and Main. You know the phrase, look good, feel good. Well, oftentimes a lot of dress clothes check one of those boxes. You look sharp, but everything feels stiff, hot, and high maintenance. That's why there's Mizzen and Main. I wear Mizzen and Main for my game day fits. I'm actually wearing a Mizzen and Main shirt right now, but I love it for the game day fits because they use the performance fabric dress shirt, something that they actually invented 10 years ago. So it can hang with me when I'm having a sprint from the press box to the interview room, to the locker room, and then out on the field for post-game stuff. I love Mizzen and Main. I know you will too. And right now, Mizzen and Main is giving our listeners 20% off of their first purchase at mizzenandmain.com with the promo code LOCKEDONNFL20. That's Mizzen, spelled M-I-Z-Z-E-N, and Main, M-A-I-N.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL20 for 20% off. And if you'd rather shop in person, you can also find Mizzen and Main stores in select states. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where you can get in on the NFL season, which is here, and they're making sure that they have a deal for you that you won't want to miss. Red alert, sound the alarms. The New Orleans Saints are finally favorites for the first time this season. 1.5-point favorites going into this weekend's game up against the New York Giants. A great time to get in over at FanDuel if you've not tried them out before. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 for your first bet. And if that $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bet. So you pick a bet, put down $5. If that bet hits, you unlock $300 in bonus bets used all across the app. Odds, lines, props, spreads, same game parlays, live betting, and so much more, all available for you over at FanDuel today. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app so that you can get started today. Once again, that's FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints are going to have to be ready to manage yet again without yet another starter on their offensive line for multiple weeks. In the very same week where the New Orleans Saints got Taliosi back after missing week 3 up against the Seattle Seahawks with a back/knee injury, and getting Trevor Penning back after a long wait since the preseason up against the Chargers, where he suffered that toe injury, finally got him back in week 4 up against the Buffalo Bills. And in that very same game, Cesar Ruiz leaves the game with an ankle injury, was carted out at halftime. And now, according to Ian Rappaport over at NFL Network, he is likely to miss 4 to 6 weeks with a high ankle sprain. Nick Underhill over at New Orleans Football was first on games missed, saying that he would already be out and ruled out for this week's game, something that Kellen Moore has already confirmed. And so now you're looking at the New Orleans Saints having to turn to yet another backup at yet another spot on their offensive line. But I will say this, the Saints' depth is better this year than it was last year in terms of the top couple of guys they get to turn to, particularly on the interior in Dillon Radunz as well as Torricelli Simpkins, who have performed acceptable to well over the course of this season so far. I wouldn't say either of them have performed great. Torricelli Simpkins was awesome in the preseason at center. He's been mostly fine at either left guard or right guard. And now he's moving around. Things are changing. He's looking at things at different angles. It all makes a lot of sense. But it's a big time opportunity for Torricelli Simpkins, who is a rookie on an undrafted free agent deal, to be able to come in and potentially start some more games. Because remember, Dillon Radunz right now is also dealing with a toe injury, which has kept him out of the last pair of games. So unless he makes his return to the field this week, where he could reclaim the right guard spot where he started 15 games with the Tennessee Titans last year, there's a real chance that Torricelli Simpkins is stepping right back in for a second week over the course of 3 weeks as a starter on the interior offensive line. Remember, he started at left guard up against the the Seattle Seahawks, my apologies, when Trevor Penning had just started to make his way back, but wasn't quite there yet. Torricelli Simpkins started that game. So what I did was that I kind of did the same thing looked at the same kind of information that I looked at when it came to Taysom Hill and his impact on situational game plans, right? We were talking about red zone and third downs and fourth downs and goal to go situations, all those other things. Well, I just wanted to look at pressure numbers and sack percentage when it came to when Cesar Ruiz was on the field versus off the field, what that's looked like with Torricelli Simpkins so far this season and what it's looked like with Dillon Radunz so far this season. So in order to get a fair sample size of this when it came to Cesar Ruiz, I didn't worry about 2025. I went back to 2024, 2023, and 2022, the non-Peyton years, basically, with Cesar Ruiz, because I didn't want to take into account the same things that maybe Sean Payton was doing that obviously Pete Carmichael wasn't doing, and Clint Kubiak was doing. It felt like too much of a difference in terms of what that could look like for an offense. And so I focused on the non-Peyton years, but I can always go back. We can look at more as well if people want to know more about it. But this is all from our friends over at True Media, who make all this kind of stuff very possible and very, very easy to locate. So let's break it all down. With Cesar Ruiz on the field over the course of the most recent 3 years, not including 2025, the Saints have had a lower sack percentage and a lower pressure percentage. The sack percentage goes from 5.6% with him on the field to 8.8% with him off the field. The pressure percentage ticks up nearly 8% when he's off the field. Now, there's some context to that, right? A lot of times when Cesar Ruiz wasn't on the field, other offensive linemen weren't on the field as well. So this is really only giving us one small snapshot, but the Saints offensive line, and I know people are going to hate hearing this, but the Saints offensive line, on average, percentage-wise, the numbers tell us, have been indisputably better than when he is not on the field, even though he has been on the field much more than he's been off of the field. And so you would expect there to be maybe more glimpses, more errors, things like that, and a higher percentage. That has not been the case. The Saints offensive line is indisputably, by the numbers from 2024, 2023, and 2022, better with him on the field than off the field by multiple percentage points. Now, let's take a look at what this looks like with Torricelli, Simpkins, as well as Dillon Radunz, because one of these guys has a similar impact on the offensive line so far this very year in Kellen Moore's offense. Looking at Torricelli, Simpkins, the numbers go the other way. Off the field, they have a better sack percentage by just about 1%. So you can probably deal with that. 5.4% with him on the field, 5.4% with him off the field, 6.2% with him on the field. So it goes up, but not really by a ton. It's about 0.8%, but that's nearly a 1% difference. It's pretty big when it comes to sack percentage. However, when it comes to pressure percentage, a more than 5% leap with him on the field versus off the field. They have a better pressure percentage with him off the field than they do with him on, going from 34.3% up to 39.7% when he is in the lineup. So not going the right direction in terms of the promise that Torricelli Simpkins has shown. Now, the big value here of going to Torricelli Simpkins with Cesar Ruiz out would be to help Simpkins continue to develop. So the numbers don't have to tell the entire story just yet. It's just where things are now and shows you that there's some development opportunity there for Simpkins. And so ideally, he gets that opportunity this season, which should be all about developing young potential and young talent throughout the remainder of this year. Now, Dillon Radunz has been excellent for this team. He has been awesome when on the field. Sack percentage is down 2% with him on the field versus when he's off the field. And then pressure percentage is down 4% with him on the field versus off the field. So they are a better offensive line with Dillon Radunz in the lineup than with him out of the lineup. Has a very similar impact to Cesar Ruiz. Now, early on in the season, Radunz was starting at left guard while Trevor Penning was out. If he makes it back to the lineup, coming back from the toe injury at some point while Cesar Ruiz is out, he returns to his right guard position where he played 15 games last year with the Tennessee Titans. And so if the Saints get the opportunity to get Dillon Radunz back, I assume that he would be the one that would step in place of Cesar Ruiz. He has arguably been the better player when it comes to the comparison between he and Torricelli Simpkins. But boy, you'd sure love to see Torricelli Simpkins and that aggressive play style get developed over the course of the year. So for this, it's going to be all about what the New Orleans Saints want more. You want to keep your quarterback clean, or you want to develop talent on the offensive line, or do you feel like you can do both now that you have Trevor Penning and Taliesin Fuanga back in the lineup? Those are the questions that the New Orleans Saints will have to answer while Cesar Ruiz is out for 4 to 6 weeks with a high ankle sprain. Coming up next, no matter who's starting on the offensive line, the New Orleans Saints absolutely need to build their identity around their run game. Let's break down some of the things they can do to do exactly that. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Rougiette. The New Orleans Saints started to build some confidence on the playing field this past week in an impressive performance up against the Buffalo Bills. But you would like some of the impressive performances in your home field as well. That's where Rougiette Go Long comes in. They're not just an ED pill. We're talking about a total game changer for confidence where it matters the most. Combines 2 doctor-trusted medications into a dual-action formula so that you can make sure that you're ready to go the distance and be ready to go for a while. Lasts up to 36 hours do the effects, so confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day as well. So if you're ready to level up your confidence in your playing field, the bedroom, head to rugiet.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 15% off of your order. That's rugiet.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL, and make sure you use our code so that they know that we sent you. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints must build their identity moving forward throughout the rest of the season around Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller in the run game, or the extended run game, meaning the short passing game, screen game, things like that. Let's break down how they can do it. We'll take a look at what's working, and we'll take a look at how we've seen this before from Kellen Moore. We're going to dive into all that here as we wrap up today's show. Don't forget, you can catch us every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Central Time over at the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. And if you're looking for some additional content, make sure you join the Insider program by texting WHODAT to 504-285-7473, or click the link in the description. We just did a great Q&A earlier on Monday morning. Loved it. Great questions. Lots of good content in there. So if you want extra stuff, make sure you come through for that. You can try the first 14 days for free, $4.99 a month after that. Buy me a cup of coffee, contribute to the show, contribute to the travel fund. All that always helps out a ton, and always fun to have our insiders involved in what we got going on here. So let's break down what the Saints have done so far when it comes to their rushing game. I think that the Buffalo Bills game was a great barometer for the fact that the Saints could indeed build their team and their identity around their rushing attack. I think we saw it up against the San Francisco 49ers as well. A very, very good rushing defense where they ran for 121 yards. A very, very good rushing defense the first game as well up against the Arizona Cardinals, where they ran for 107 yards as a team. Up against the Buffalo Bills, going up against the worst rushing team in the NFL, they did not fall down. And we've seen this several times where a team will go up against a team that has a clear vulnerability and not be able to take advantage of that vulnerability. The Saints did not do that. 189 rushing yards up against the Buffalo Bills on a season-high 34 rushes. That includes some quarterback scrambles, things like that from Spencer Rattler, who contributed over 40 rushing yards by his lonesome, in addition to 135 that came from Kendre Miller as well as Alvin Kamara. Now, the interesting thing when it comes to the rushing game for New Orleans is that of those 189 rushing yards, 165 of them came after contact. So the Saints offensive line still not getting a lot of push, still under 1 yard per carry in terms of yards before contact, even up against the Buffalo Bills. But these running backs are making it work at a very, very high level, averaged 4.89 yards after contact in this game, a season high for the New Orleans Saints running backs. And so if you're going to run with that level of physicality, if you're going to run with that volume, build your offense around there if you're finding success there. We've seen this before. So that's the stuff that worked. We also see the Saints changing around a bunch. They were 50-50 in terms of inside the tackle, outside the tackle week 1. Then they went heavy inside the tackle week 2. They've gone heavy outside the tackles in the last 2 games. So the versatility and diversity of the rushing attack and the points of attack, I think, are super helpful as well. Now, we've seen Kellen Moore do this before. Through the first 4 weeks of the season last year with the Philadelphia Eagles, in weeks 3 and 4 rushed for 20 and 25 times, so less than 30 times in those 2 games. After that, after Kellen Moore made his adjustments to build the offense around Saquon Barkley and the rushing game, the Philadelphia Eagles spent weeks 5 through 17 never rushing for less than 30 times. Never with 30 or fewer than 30 rushing attempts. It wasn't until week 18 when they ran 25 times in that matchup at the very end of the season. Now, that was with Saquon Barkley, and that was a team that ended up winning the Super Bowl. The Saints don't have Saquon Barkley. They are not winning a Super Bowl here in 2025. So those comparisons aren't necessarily the same. But just in terms of Kellen Moore's ability to say, you know what, gonna build around a run game, I think you can see a little bit of the value there. Then you can build the rest of the identity for this team around what you're getting from the run game. Spencer Rattler's thrown 5 touchdowns here so far through the first 4 games of the season. 3 of them have come off of play action. In the last 3 games, the Saints have run play action plays 11, 10, and 18 times. Those 11 and 18 times were against the Buffalo Bills and the San Francisco 49ers, 2 of their best rushing games. That's how you build the identity of this team. And last week, the Saints added something that was A, super smart, and now B, something they can continue to diversify their offense with. And that was a lot of under center snaps, going from around 14% to around 27% of their snaps under center last week. That gives you a lot of opportunity to really begin to mix a lot. And speaking of mixing a lot, that's something that Kellen Moore wants to do with this offense. He wants to be able to play what he calls mixed down football. So it's either a passing down or a rushing down, or ideally, the defense doesn't know which one's coming, right? You're not in a 3rd and 10 situation, which is a clear passing down. But if you're in a 3rd and 1, it could be either one. If you're not in 2nd and 10, which could be, it's a very inefficient rushing down, but could be a big time passing down. If you get to 2nd and 5, it could be either. And so you're trying to create those mixed down opportunities. And the better that the Saints can run the football, especially on 1st and 2nd downs, which they've continued to do well this season, the better off they're going to be when it comes to their opportunity to be able to build this offense up throughout the 2025 season and doing it through its run game. I think getting Devin Neal more involved would certainly help there. And why not give Velus Jones Jr. some opportunities too, especially if you can get him involved in a halfback screen game, which we've not seen much of so far this season. So a lot of things the Saints can add in, blend, refine, and build off of, just starting with the run game that they begin to build over the course of the first 4 games of this 2025 season. Alrighty, y'all, coming up in tomorrow's episode, Film Watch Wednesday. So we'll dive even further into this run game and just what's not working about the New Orleans Saints passing game. We got all that coming up for you in tomorrow's show. We appreciate you very much for making this a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.